Yes, it's a smaller bubble than it needs to be, right?
Yeah.
We need a bigger bubble.
Yeah, we need to talk to parents, right? We need to talk to parents that don't have a history with the trades. We need to talk to people outside on the fringe and talk about the value of this work when done well.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk Podcast, our regular discussion with building industry professionals. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Rob Yagid, former Fine Homebuilding Editor and Executive Director of Keep Craft Alive. You can find the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk Podcast and the original Fine Homebuilding Podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can leave feedback and ask questions there too. Rob, it is a pleasure to see you, man.
Happy to be here, man. It's been a while.
Welcome back to the podcast.
I know. I'm stoked about it. It's one of my fondest memories from my time at FHB. It's always been fun to record this podcast with you also.
I totally agree, and I can't believe I'm lucky enough to get paid to do it. It's amazing.
I know, right?
So the world has changed quite a bit since we last spoke. How's your life? I bet there's been some changes in your work and home balance.
Yeah, absolutely. Like everybody else, COVID has kind of upended my day-to-day, so to speak. Since I left the magazine a few years ago, I think I left my post there like the week before my daughter was to be born, or right in that midst. And I had since had another child, so I've got a son in the house as well. So it's been who just turned one actually last weekend. So 2020 has been a trip for sure.
I bet you were so glad to get that upstairs addition squared away, right?
Yeah, buttoned it up just in the nick of time for my daughter to arrive, and got everything set, and the punch list was even done, right? That never happens.
Nope. You needed that milestone, right, to get you done, right?
Oh yeah. And then I don't know, it was very shortly after, seemingly, that we found out that my wife was pregnant again, and so we'll need another bedroom at some point. So it almost immediately became insufficient.
So are you going to put an addition on, or are you going to carve out some other space in the house?
We've pretty much carved what we could carve. I mean, I think, even with the addition, we're maybe at 1,600 square feet.
Yep.
And so, we are entertaining putting an addition on, or that conversation, do we move? But we've put so much into this house, and not only just financially, but so much sweat and, care.
And you start to like the place you're living in when you've worked on it for years, right?
Yeah. So, we might be going the addition route, which it's a fun project, right?
So we've been talking to Mike Gerton about, permanent wood foundations. You thinking that way? You could totally do it yourself. Yeah.
I actually thought about that just because I did, reflect on the pro home that he had built where he used the ICFs, and, a DIY foundation is appealing. I have not looked into wood foundations. I mean, I'm sure everyone, like myself, my own perception right now is well, that's a bad idea. But I'm sure he's got some compelling reasons why it works.
It's cheap.
Any carpenter can do it, right? And it's cheap. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So I introduced you as former Fine Homebuilding Editor and, Director of Keep Craft Alive, but you have other jobs too besides being a dad in addition. So can you tell folks what else you're doing?
Yeah, sure. So I left, I've remained as Executive Director of Keep Craft Alive, and I spend a fair amount of my time focusing on that program. But I also help run digital media at a nonprofit called Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, which is headquartered out of Missoula, Montana.
Do you want to plug the website?
Sure. Yeah, it's backcountryhunters.org, and really, it's a nonprofit that is centered on advocacy for our wild public lands, waters, and wildlife. And so, really, it was developed and launched to give a voice to these large, intact landscapes. And so, we advocate for places like Bristol Bay in Alaska and the Boundary Waters in Minnesota. We kind of advocate for the preservation of wildlife migration corridors throughout the West, and access and opportunity on public lands, whether you hunt, fish, hike, camp, bird watcher, kayaker, rock climber. I mean, we've got a a membership of 40,000. That is a pretty diverse and inclusive bunch. And we've got chapters all across North America who not only work on those top tier issues that I just mentioned, but also on local public land policy.
Cool.
And so, yeah, it's a passion of mine. Obviously, I love to be outdoors, pretty much doing anything. Yep. And, I've been fortunate enough to have experiences, on public lands all across the country, specifically out west. I think of like my times in Arizona and northern Idaho. And, there's special places to me, and they are under threat. And so, I made that kind of pivotal decision to at least harness my experience to kind of push that mission forward. And so if anybody really wants to understand the issue, I suggest watching the film Public Trust, which was my organization, helped out on that, but it was produced by Patagonia, and it is free on YouTube. And it'll pretty much give you a pretty good idea into the situation we face as Americans, and also the work that needs to be done. So
what's it called again?
Check it out. It's called Public Trust.
All right.
And it's free on YouTube. Yeah, check it out. I think you'll enjoy it. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. I do that. In addition to being a dad and working on the house.
Are you working on the house presently? You got stuff going on?
Of course, man. So actually, I'm not actually working on the house. I've, early summer, I decided to build a small barn on the property.
Cool.
Big shed, small barn kind of thing. It's like just a touch under 200 square feet, just because in my, not for any reason, because it's built in a legit fashion, but I don't need a permit for anything under 200 square feet. And that would have streamlined the process, especially given COVID. And so, yeah, I've been kind of, pounding away at that.
Have you been having trouble getting material like everybody else?
The PT, when it came to like the floor system and stuff like that, was a little bit of a struggle, but I managed. And I just recognized, as I've kind of been buying material, I've been kind of closing my eyes as I swipe that debit card.
Yeah.
Which wasn't like the best time to build it, but I want the outdoor storage.
Is that for the lawnmower and stuff? Is that the plan for that space?
Yeah, it's for everything. I mean, like I said, we have got a small house, partially finished basement.
That's gonna be Kayla's bedroom someday.
Yeah, well, my daughter thinks this. I refer to it as her house, and she's always interested on like the progress on her house. And I primed it the other day, and she was super bummed that it was white and not pink. And so, but yeah, I've been working on that. I'm really stoked how it's coming out. It is actually built on, it is built to look like it's on the foundation of an old existing barn. On our property, we've had several kind of barns and a silo that are no longer here, but the foundations are intact. So the best thing about the barn, from my point of view, I had nothing to do with. It's like the beautiful stone wall.
That's cool.
That is in place, and I kind of cantilevered the floor system so it appears as if the barn is sitting on this old foundation when it's not, but it looks like it is.
That's cool as heck.
Really nice. Yeah, I'll send you some photos for sure.
Yeah, please do, and we'll put them on the podcast page too.
There you go. Cool.
Can you please explain Keep Craft Alive for our listeners who are not familiar with it? Let's start with how did it get started and when?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of had a pretty organic development where in 2015, 2016, around that time, I was trying to determine my own presence in the social media game, and very reluctant to turn the camera on myself. Not only reluctant, but like completely disinterested in doing that. And so I felt like, okay, like maybe my feed could be a highlight of people from the FH community, throughout the years. These are top tier craftsmen, as everybody knows, and just casting a personal light on them, with this premise of kind of keeping the spotlight on true craftsmanship, the people and the passions within our community, and just celebrating those in a really, transparent and true fashion. And I started to like hang the concept of Keep Craft Alive on some of those posts, and like almost like immediately it pivoted, right, and kind of began to mushroom. And so really in the early days, it was more about the narrative, right? It was just a narrative around like who's doing this work and why they do it. And that still remains true today. And so, in the back of every issue of the magazine, we're profiling someone from, different parts of the trades and, exploring what they do and why they do it. But then we thought we could do more with it, right? And at that time, there was, the industry was feeling the tremors and the shockwaves of the skills gap. And again, at that time, that it has since shifted. But I think there were lots of people within the construction industry feeling like isolated in the fact that they were dealing with these challenges, and they may have felt like, well, it's their business model or it's their market. And so what we wanted to do through this Keep Craft Alive program was to identify what the challenges were, like identify and provide definition to the skills gap and what that meant, like the disparity between the amount of work and the volume of work that was in demand and the complete shortage of capable, qualified, skilled practitioners to meet that demand. And so obviously, everybody's been dealing with that since. And so our mission has evolved to maintain the narrative around what it means to be a true craftsman, but then also to provide educational opportunities and financial support to those who are most passionate about pursuing careers in the trades. And so that grew into a formal partnership with Skills USA 3 years ago, and they help administer the Keep Craft Alive scholarship that we award every year.
And so what kind of educational programs are included in the folks we're trying to reach with this program?
So it's really full spectrum, right? I try to be mindful of diversity in trades and the stories that we're telling. And so, we've had everyone, architects and I know that we've featured folks who are making handmade tiles, tile setters, plumbers, electricians, the full gamut. And that is reflective in our scholarship too. Primarily, we've awarded scholarships to those within Skills USA, within VOTEC programs who are studying in the fields of like HVAC, electrical, masonry, carpentry, even some architecture. Skills USA, they do have categories in cabinet making and things like that as well. And so there's still some peripheral interest, but yeah, we try to align those awards with the fields of study that the Skills USA students are actually undertaking.
And is there an application process? How does the scholarship money get given out?
Sure. Yeah. So fortunately, and one of the principal reasons why we partner with Skills USA, which is a massive organization, I think they've got roughly 400,000 students and instructors across the country, 4,000 chapters across the country, and they're not independent, right? They're kind of affiliated with a school, right? And so it's kind of like an extracurricular component to their development. And so they manage the entire scholarship, but there is an application process. Students are free to apply. They submit a letter kind of expressing what their hopes and interests are when pursuing a position in this field, what craftsmanship means to them. They also are required to submit a letter of recommendation. And
is that theoretically someone from the trades, or can it be from anywhere?
Most often it's one of their mentors or instructors. Yeah. Yep. And then I sit down. In the past, there's been a few of us at Fine Homebuilding who have sat down to make our selections. This most recent year, I made the selections myself, and we were able to give away 14 scholarships this year. To date, I think it's upwards of 80 awards and $170,000, somewhere in that ballpark.
Wow!
And so, yeah, it's been a really critical piece of the program. And something that we're looking to expand on too. We've got pretty ambitious fundraising goals this year to the tune of $100,000. And while we are still committed and super grateful and find tremendous value in the Skills USA program, we're also being mindful of, are there other areas to explore too, specifically within, maybe providing financial support to veterans and things like that. So those are
That's what I was just going to ask. So Skills USA is primarily a high school and like probably junior college program, correct? So
correct. Yeah, they've got they have programs for middle school, high school, post-secondary, collegiate, and of course our scholarship is more or less focused on the upper end of that. People who are just contemplating either they need certain certifications that need funding for, or they're going to continue their professional development or education within even go to college or they're kind of left to use those funds as they wish to kind of further their training, let's call it. I don't want to say education necessarily because that could be disparate, but yeah.
What do you think about the quality of the skilled trade education in this country? Are there enough programs? Is there enough diversity in the programs? Are they spread out in the country enough that people from all over can attend them?
It's an interesting question because on one hand, I want to say yes. There's plenty of opportunity for those interested and wanting to gain knowledge in this field. On the other hand, I think of the complete extraction of shop class in our public education experience, and I think that's not necessarily trade. That's not necessarily fuel. Well, I think it could be fueling the trades, but it's removing a point of experience that could trigger and inspire someone to.
You don't know you like something if you've never been exposed to it, right?
Correct.
If you've never had a chance to work with your hands on a project because your family's not into that or whatever, at least when you were a high school when these programs were in place, you'd get some exposure and be like, wow, this is awesome.
Right. Yeah. The spark is lit at that point in your life. Right. And so I think that is obviously lacking, and we're paying the consequences for that decision. And I think it's only getting worse because, we've got a generational gap now, right? People, I had shop class, growing up, in high school, but maybe, folks a little bit younger than me, not much.
Yeah. A couple years, right?
Yeah. They didn't have that opportunity. Right. And now they're kind of growing up and they don't have the aptitude or the interest or the skill sets that they're not passing down necessarily to their children. And, shop class hasn't come back. And so, so there's a huge lack of opportunity for experience, I think. And so, and that has driven a major wedge and facilitated this issue that we're addressing. But I think for people, if they can get kind of, if they got an uncle or if they got a friend or if they kind of, gain any type of experience with hands-on work and show an inclination that like maybe this is something that they want to do, I do think that there are ample opportunities for them to kind of pursue that. It's a tough road, right? Because it's going to be of their own volition, and they're going to have to confront a lot of some social pressures.
That's something I want to talk to you about. That's a perfect segue. So I wanted to be an electrician, and I wanted to go to technical school when I was in high school. And I think I'd have been really good at it, but my parents talked me out of it. And they were, because there's this stigma that, trade school is for kids who are having problems in school for whatever reason, and this is something else they can do.
Right.
Do you think that that's still a common perception, and what can we do about it if it is?
Yeah, 100%. Right. I mean, back to the trade school. Back to the shop class, piece. I think a lot of contractors and a lot of parents, I went along with that. Right. Yeah. Like they weren't.
They weren't going to the school board meeting and saying you can't close the shop.
And saying there's absolutely not. Like we value this. We value this as a community. We value this as parents. You know what I mean? I think everyone felt, not everyone, but obviously. A majority of people fell into the trap of like, well, they want, quote, better for their son or daughter. And that may not have panned out, right? And so, I do think that we continue to face the stigma that the trades are an alternate to something else and a lesser than pursuit than something else.
What do you think your dad would have said if you told him that you wanted to be a carpenter when you were, finishing high school?
I think he would have been on board with it because I kind of was to a degree, right? I mean, I got a journalism degree and then joined a framing crew, But I think, like my parents just, they, fortunately they always just, supported whatever it was that I wanted to do.
How about your siblings?
Yeah, the same is true. They're not in the field. They're not in the construction field. But I think that gets to my point, right? One of my points is, and I think you'd asked me in a prior conversation about this idea of just trying to get bodies into the industry, right? And what I'm trying to be mindful of with Keep Craft Alive is not to necessarily solve the skills gap, because the skills gap is an issue, right? Like it is, it is.
Yeah, but if you have the wrong people filling the positions, that's not helpful.
Right. Or if you have people who are not happy and passionate about what they're doing, then who cares, right? Like that's not an admirable objective to me. And so like what I don't want us to fall into the trap of is to all of a sudden develop another track. And let's start like tracking kids and tracking students based upon the needs of the industry or the economy, which I understand, you know what I mean? Like there needs to be some kind of balance, but let's honor personal interests, personal passions. And so I think that's like what we're focused on with Keep Craft Live, is less so on the skills gap side and more on the people, right? And at least shedding a light on the fact that like there are professional opportunities within the trades. There are rewarding experience and livelihoods within the trades. And then having a conversation with the community itself to ensure that we're delivering on that promise, right? Because that's not, what I just said is not true across the board within the trades. Sure. There are plenty of really dead-end opportunities within the trades, low wages, high risk, jobs with dangerous practices on site. And so that's the thing that we're focusing on as well, is to explore what the opportunity actually looks like, and really kind of elevating people and business owners who have created really remarkable opportunities within the trades, and not just the guy who's looking for a body, who doesn't care about the turnover and he's looking for the lowest rate and he's just looking for labor, right? I don't think anyone aspires to be a laborer. And
no, especially for a bad builder, right? Like what redeeming quality is there?
Right. And what does that sales pitch look to, like, to the trade school student or to the public school student who might have an aptitude for working with their hands if their parents' experience with the builder was poor, or if the builders that they see in their area is less than attractive, And so we've got work to do as an industry, and as business owners and practitioners to kind of elevate how we're running our businesses.
And I think you get better clients when you do that too. When the people who work together are respectful of each other and show up and do their work well, you get better clients, right?
Yeah, and we're super jaded in that regard because that is the Fine Homebuilding community, right? Like you and I, in our positions at the magazine in the past, we've been able to kind of take a peek behind the curtain on some extraordinary programs and projects. And pretty much everybody at that table is like super respectful, really professional, really mindful of everybody within the process. Yeah. The budget isn't like the sole motivating factor. The results and the experience are, right? And so we dip into that and be like, how can everybody look at this situation and these relationships and not be interested in this? But
and I think you'd agree that the majority of the industry is not that. It is, sure, in many cases, guys of questionable integrity and questionable business practices and questionable ways they treat their employees. Right? That's more normal than the folks we hang out with.
Right, and the standards, and it change. It's different all across the country, right? But the standards that you need to abide by to open up shop are wildly different from region to region, right? Like if I want to be a contractor and I think even in Southern New England here, it's
using a pickup truck, dude.
You need a pickup truck, a business card, and some insurance, and then you're charging people money for your services.
You're on the loose.
And so there are some. And so that, if you got a low barrier to entry, right, you're going to have certainly some unqualified people serving as the face of the industry, and that's unfortunate. And so, like I said, I'm not, we're not talking to that audience here. Obviously, I mean, they're tuning into an FHB related podcast. So, but at large, I think those are a lot of the pressures that I consider constantly when I'm like figuring out, okay, like what is our role here? What is like our true role? And what positive movement can we make? And so I think, like I mentioned, diversifying, increasing our fundraising, diversifying the disbursement of those funds, continuing to celebrate the narrative of true craftsmen, and then also figuring out ways to engage with folks outside of our bubble, right? I mean,
Yes,
preaching to the
it's a
choir
small
little
it's a
bit
smaller
here.
bubble than it needs to be, right? We
Yeah.
need a bigger bubble.
Yeah, we need to talk to parents, right? We need to talk to parents that don't have a history with the trades. We need to talk to people outside on the fringe, and talk about the value of this work when done well, right? So,
With the very discouraging unemployment figures associated with the pandemic, a lot of folks have lost their jobs. The service industry is having great difficulties. Do you think we should be trying to attract those folks into the trades as a second career? Or is it still a matter of they have to want that? Or do you think it's just that maybe that they don't know that they want that too?
I think it's all of that. I think that there's something truly special about building, like that process.
It's very satisfying.
It is very satisfying, and it is very unique,
Yeah.
even coming from someone who spends most of his time these days behind a computer. I grew up around job sites, and obviously, like, I'm serial remodeling my house. Like, I won't stop, right? There will be,
Because you enjoy it. It's enjoyable for you.
But yeah. And because, like, you get to dip into that experience, and that I scratch my head sometimes wondering what it would be like to never feel that pride in the work that from a tactile and kind of spiritual point of view of, like, actually building something, constructing something, and marrying the physical with the mental. And so I think people who have found themselves in certain careers that are unfortunately forced to consider an alternate pursuit, I still think that there's something, like, within their DNA that, like, that would find value in creating with their hands. And so, do I think it's a viable segment of our culture to kind of coalesce and bring into the trades? Absolutely. But back to what I was saying, the opportunity for them needs to be apparent. And so if they were in a professional setting where they grew accustomed and their expectations are set upon a certain standard of living, whether that's their wages, whether that's their health benefits, whether that's their paid time off, whether it's like their lifestyle and their livelihoods, is that going to mirror, in the opportunities that exist within the trades? Or are they going to have to take a pay cut? Are they going to have to work an hourly rate without benefits, without paid time off? And so, because if the opportunity doesn't look viable when measured against other professional pursuits, then obviously,
they're not going to do that.
Any responsible, adult would likely choose what's in the best interest for themselves and the future of their kids and their families. And so that's why I'm so inspired by certain, businesses with, and business owners within construction that have figured out how to do that, right? How to have figured out, profit sharing and all that kind of stuff, like, with their employees, and have really created professional opportunities in the trades and not just gigs. And so, yeah, once those, I think that's, like, the big kind of equalizer when there's parity between the professional opportunities within the trades and those in office jobs, let's say.
You touched on a little bit earlier briefly. What do you see as the future of KCA, and how can people support the program?
Yeah. So narrative building, trying to mainstream the conversation that, we tend to have, and this own kind of, like, passive understanding of the value of crafts is going to be a revelation for people who don't have that background and that experience. And so to figure out opportunities to get that messaging out there to the greater public beyond the core kind of FHB crowd. Increase fundraising, because I do think that supporting those financially who may not necessarily have the means to support themselves financially in continued training and education is going to be imperative. And there's even a whole kind of value and narrative that comes along with that investment, which I think is important. And then continue the community building. There had been groups across the country, Keep Craft Alive specific groups, coming together and figuring out local challenges and local solutions. And that obviously got hijacked a little bit by the pandemic. But as we're safely able to meet in person and share knowledge, we're doing a little bit of that virtually. I hope to blow that out too. And so, because I know, one thing, and you mentioned what people could do is like, well, they're part of this. They are this program. Yeah. It's about boots on the ground and the people within these communities, with these businesses, constantly improving not only the knowledge base and their skill set, which they are doing through other fine home building mediums, but also the what and the why and the how on the back end of their business operations to be as inclusive and professional as they can be. And I think working together and sharing those thoughts and those ideas will help kind of, push at least this top tier end of the industry forward.
So tell me, there's a new Keep Craft Alive podcast, right?
Yeah.
What's that about? And
well, we're calling it loosely at this point, Keep Craft Alive Uncut. So it's really a peek behind the curtain at my interviews with the subjects that I feature in the Keep Craft Alive department at the back of every magazine.
Gotcha.
So you could hear me ramble on a little bit longer if you'd like.
I look forward to that.
No, I mean, I recognize that, the constraints of print are just that, right? I typically have 300 words to convey the experience and the passions of a particular subject. And I've consistently found myself, kind of completely inspired by the conversations that I've had with people in the field.
These people are interesting.
All over the business. They're super fascinating, right? Yeah. And I only get to cherry pick a couple of nuggets and feature them in print. And so, this podcast is a way to tell their story in a more comprehensive way. So,
and that's by the time this airs, that's probably going to be up and running. So we'll put a link to the this podcast page there, so folks can tune in and check that out, which I encourage everyone to do.
Absolutely.
So, of course, folks are going to want to know how your upstairs renovation turned out, because you guys talked about that for
forever,
a year.
Yeah.
Is there anything you would do differently? Do you think you made good decisions? Was it a good use of your money?
Yeah,
I love the postmortem on the upstairs addition.
Yeah, absolutely. Overall, we're really happy with it. It's really comfortable and functional. And though it's a cape, it had some unique elements to it that place some constrictions on the floor plan, principally like the location of the stairs and the location of a chimney that we weren't willing to get rid of. And so given those really kind of constraints, I think the floor plan and the flow feels awesome. We were able to get 2 bedrooms up there and a full bathroom, a big kind of walk-in closet off the master, lots of daylight, and through the 3 dormers that I put on the front, which I love. From the, it's comfortable. I didn't go crazy.
That's what I was going to ask you. So you, as I recall, used bats, right, in your ceiling roof assembly, but you feel like you're not sacrificing anything.
Yep. Yeah. I use bats. I use bats. And then I did the Bonfig wall treatment, so I thermally broke all of my rafters and studs with rigid foam and strapping. And, I had been wondering okay, am I going to be getting lots of screw pops in the drywall or anything like that? And obviously, that has not been the case. And so I was excited about that piece. Overall, we're really happy with it. We just need 1 more bedroom.
So here's something I ask folks all the time who do the Pro Talk podcast. Do you have any building science problems that you're either happily ignoring or wish you could take care of?
Overall conditioning in my house is always an issue, right? I have had the pleasure of being in really high-performing homes where everything is, the air quality. Yeah, everything's warm. The air quality is perfect. And I've got a kind of a mixed bag of elements, right? I predominantly heat with a wood stove in the winter with, I've got a boiler. So with backup, hydronic, and then in the summers, we didn't splurge for a central AC system when we did the upstairs. And so we do kind of some window units kind of, strategically placed. And so there's like big swings, right? And so that's just something that I'm always, I guess, like I reflect on this to my wife that like, if we were to resolve that, that's a pretty big undertaking. And I don't know if we'll ever get that. I don't know if I'll ever get to the way that I felt in a passive house in Maine in the dead of winter, right? That was like, I was just hanging out on a concrete slab in front of, 8-foot, wide, glazed windows, and as comfortable as I've ever been.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's, when people talk about performance in building science, and yes, I think there is a very serious climate consideration in terms of climate change and financial, implication. But that comfort, when people try to sell comfort, it's not BS. It's legit. Those houses are extremely comfortable. So
and quiet.
Yeah. Quiet, yeah.
When I was in, in New York City, going through some of those passive house brownstones, right? Like you close those tilt-turn windows and all the noises of New York City just go away. It's just silent in there. It's really impressive. Yeah. So that's what I battle, and I recognize that if we were to stay in here and not do a deep energy retrofit, that I'm going to have to work around those issues. So just throw some more logs on the fire, brother.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. Is there anything you want to tell our listeners or ask them?
Yeah, no, I just appreciate all the support. Keep Craft Alive has always exceeded all of our expectations at Fine Homebuilding, and it's largely, due to the passion of the community. And so I just, appreciate everyone who has shown their support in the past. And if anybody has, questions, comments, if they want to figure out how they can get engaged, or if they have
want to send a check.
They want to send a check, hit up Patrick personally. Reach out, keepcraftalive.org, check out the website. And then, you could always shoot me an email directly at rob@keepcraftalive.org. And I love to connect. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. Thanks to Rob for joining us, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everyone. Thanks for listening. Happy building, and keep craft alive.